So welcome back to episode 3 of Circle in Time miniseries podcast. Thank you for tuning in to the first couple episodes. For those of you who have tuned in, we're going to do a deep dive on our third album, Endless Dawn, from the trilogy Circle in Time. So let's get into it. What was the vibes on this one?
It was definitely the continuation of Forever Now. That's the beginnings of this. I do remember once we got to this point where we're like, okay, we're actually going to do a third album. Because I remember at first it was going to be like a part B that was supposed to come out the same year. And then we're like, okay, this is a bit too much. Maybe we're rushing it. No reason to rush it. Things are flowing. Things are nice. Let's step back a second. And I think at that point we're like, okay, let's just go into it thinking it's a whole new album.
Yeah.
The whole new cycle. And I remember the first thing was you conceptualizing what this one was going to be as a continuation of the first two.
Yeah, which was a disaster. Because it was like, cool, we had forest, earth, then we had water, sky, and I was like, fire. We're getting fire album. I'd watched Avatar, the Nickelodeon show, and I was like obsessed with like the elements.
Yep. And then you're like, why don't we just start with the art first rather than the name?
And the art was looking horrible.
Yeah.
Rich was like sending us all these ideas and everything was like not happening.
Yeah, it looked like too evil. Evil looking.
And then somehow we were like, well, let's just go with the desert.
Yeah.
And then once we did that, then it was like perfect.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, you want to talk about your relationship with it?
I mean, I grew up in Kuwait first like 11 years of my life, which was all desert. And then I moved to Egypt, which was more desert. And so the desert landscape was a big part of my life, my upbringing, everything.
And you had that picture in your studio on Peel Street, the first studio that we were in together.
Montreal, yeah.
Yeah, he had this beautiful painting of this Bedouin man, and he was in the desert on these dunes, and it was just like this shadowy figure, and he was kind of enveloping, like embracing another person, but they were sort of just merging into his cloak.
Yep.
To his robe, and it was like such a beautiful picture, and we moved that to our next studio for a while.
Sure.
And I remember we were always saying like, yeah, the music we make like feels like that.
Yeah, it's like a sense of security. It's like a blanket.
Yeah. But also like open and vast.
Yep.
Yeah, the deserts always feels like a good place for us.
Side note, we almost moved to Egypt too.
Yeah,
so,
that's right.
Yeah.
In 2009, before we moved, when we were thinking about moving out of Montreal, we were this close to moving to Egypt.
Yeah.
And then
when the revolution happened in Egypt and it wasn't viable anymore.
Yeah. And then the electronic music scene really took off here, and we ended up in LA. So
yeah,
there's always a part of us. I feel like a part of our identity is very much in the desert.
Definitely.
And very much like a sand dune desert, which is why when we were working on, we skip ahead a bit, but like when we were working on the imagery of like the promotion of the album, I was like, we got to go to the sand dunes. We were talking about flying to Egypt. I was like, we got to do it. We got to we can't do AI. Like we have to go.
I was trying to be lazy about it, but you're adamant.
I was like, we have to be in the dunes. And we found this amazing place in California, near San Luis Obispo, that has miles of untouched sand dunes right by the ocean. And we filmed a whole day out there. And it was
went down like a whole Reddit thread to figure out where to get
blog,
the secret.
This girl was like, here's where you park, here's where you walk in. And we didn't know what was going to happen. We showed up with a drone video guy and Kirby, our photographer. And we were like, 4 hours later, we like roll in there and we're like, we walk in and it was like, I felt like we landed on Tatooine.
Incredible.
I have videos of us just like
where are we?
Yeah,
how do we find this
so
place?
exciting. And we did a whole photo shoot and video, and it was just like, I was like, this is perfect.
It was perfect.
Yeah, very special. So
I think at the point when we established that, okay, conceptually this is going to be desert and this is going to be a whole theme behind it, we're like, okay, do we have enough songs? Do we want to make more songs?
Right.
And at that point, we had also, remember, I just sold my house with the studio that we had been working in for like 9 years.
Yeah, and we're very comfortable in.
So comfortable. And we're like, oh no, well, we got to start all over again here. So we got a new space and we wanted to get it designed and sounding just as good as the last space. So we hired the same engineer and designer who did our first studio to come back and do this one. But it was going to take 3 to 4 months. So we're like, what do we do in the meantime? So we reached out to every single contact we had to try to find an interim studio. And we landed
in this guy Michael Vale Bloom's studio, who recorded. He was an engineer on Madonna's music in the 80s, worked with a lot of big artists, and he had this cool little studio of like 5 minutes from your house, which was good because you had a little baby.
Yeah.
And the studio was really cool. It had a live room with a live piano, which influenced the album. It had a control room. It had a little kitchenette. It was cold because it was the winter in LA, and the heating did not work properly. So we were freezing all the time. The sound was different. Speakers were different. Like we never got comfortable in that studio.
No.
And we were preparing for the tour for Forever Now. We were on the road. We were coming back to that studio. We were dealing with the building. It was a really hectic time.
Yep.
And we were trying to make stuff.
Yep.
We already had the songs. We already had I'll Be Here. We already had Under the Surface. We already had Falling Behind. We knew we had like a bunch of cool stuff. We were like, okay, we need to make some new ideas. And everything that we made, it just felt like it wasn't going well. We started Out of the Silence with Tasha and Mckay there.
Mm-hmm. Started End there.
Yeah, well, we started End there. We started All I Know there. I played live pianos recorded from the piano.
Yep.
All these ideas, and like at the time we were thinking like, oh, these ideas are not good. And when we finally finished the studio,
the new studio.
Yeah, the new studio. We moved in. We went back and listened to that stuff, and it was like, this is awesome. Yeah. Sounded great.
I feel like every project we open, we're like, wow, this is amazing.
It really sounded great. And I think that I think it made me realize that when you're uncomfortable, like sometimes being out of your comfort zone makes you do stuff that you wouldn't normally do. Mm-hmm. I think that was a cool lesson for me.
For sure. I think you also like come up with great stuff when there's like so much chaos around you and you're not thinking too much about it, and you just put it down.
Yeah.
And then
totally. We didn't have time to overthink this out.
At all.
Yeah. And I remember, and then the new space, which was really peaceful. Our new studio now is very peaceful. It's all bamboo. There's a lot of natural light. We made all these kind of happy songs like Cloud Lifter, Bracket Burst, Murmur. Yeah, those all came in the new studio.
Yeah.
And in the middle of all that, we went to London and played a show there.
Yep.
And we did a session with Julia, and that's where All I Know came out of. So the album was really recorded in like 4 different studios. Michael's studio, our original studio,
the London
one, and then our new studio. So it was kind of an album that was done in like patchwork, but it feels consistent because it just kind of had like a vibe. And I think once we knew Desert, we were sort of like, it was easy to sort of say, okay, this doesn't fit that vibe, you know? Because we had the visuals so early, we sort of knew what we wanted it to sound like. I was obsessed with it being like a gut, I wanted it to be like, oh, it's a deep, and it is a very deep album. I feel like this is the saddest album.
I feel like Something Everything's the saddest album for me.
Really?
Yeah.
I feel like this one was just like, and we wanted to work. We knew we had worked with Shalou. We knew we wanted to work with him again.
Yes.
Mckay, who had been a co-writer and a big lyrical part of the first 2 albums, he was a huge part of this album.
The Shalou record was also done in the new studio.
Yeah, Shalou, Out of the Silence, and Tishmal were all with Mckay. Mm-hmm. And I think we knew we really wanted for it to feel like the finale. Mm-hmm. Like it was sort of like, how do you end this story? And I think that was like a cool setting, because it's sort of like, okay, there has to be a fair amount of sadness. Like this story is sort of ending. Right. But
it's not really the end. It's the end of the beginning of the, there you go. So
it's like, it kind of made us question, like, what is an end? Yeah. What does it mean to end something? Does something ever really end? Right. And I think that was like the question that we asked ourselves a lot. And conclusion that we came to was that it's like, no, the end is the beginning. You end things so that you can begin other things. And so those 2 things are connected. And that felt really hopeful. And so there was room for like the hope and the sadness in there, which I think, I don't know. There's like, someone said like, well, you guys make like breakup music, because there's a lot of our tracks that like feel like breakup songs, but I don't know. I think that the other thing about a breakup is that allows you
Right.
space to
Start something new.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
So I think that all kind of comes together.
Definitely.
So is there a song that for you kind of like is like the heart of this album?
I think I'll Be Here. It's probably the one that really sticks the most for me. I think just lyrically, it just resonated so much with me because of everything I'd gone on with Forever Now and my mom and my daughter and all that. So it felt like it really captured that essence of it. Interesting enough, we also like spent so much time working that record to kind of fit it and mold it into what it is now. And when it started off as just basically like Alex Elderbrook was in the studio with us and just spitting out these vocals, and then we formulated it into an idea, and then Dan asked us to change the idea and try a different instrumental on it, and then it became what it is. It's that evolution from where it started in like the Forever Now territory, or right after Something Everything, and where it ended up in Endless Dawn.
Yeah.
How about you?
I think All I Know was a really important record. I loved that process of writing it with Julia in London, and it just felt like a really honest thing of, you know, everyone's gone through a breakup. I think that feels like that.
Yeah, and I know
that you're losing a friend, you know.
Totally.
That one, and I think also Under the Surface.
That's an incredible record.
Yeah, I just remember Nathan, like, we've worked with him for such a long time, and I think when he made that record, I remember you put down this kind of idea to go around it, and I was like, this is going to be amazing, and the lyrics are just, you know,
It's so real.
Yeah.
Just like things that you want to say but haven't said, or things that you feel and want to say out loud but haven't.
Exactly. And I think also My Time and Back Through You were tracks that over time have started to define the album for me.
Yeah.
And I remember we were really excited about those records when we made them finally, but yeah, now they're starting to feel like the records that I feel the most excited to listen to now, which is interesting.
So I feel like every one of these albums has like a personal story that kind of like attaches itself to it indirectly. And I know that probably most people don't know, but you went through this crazy experience in your life and you're still going through it. And I think it's important that you share it because it's a huge part of this album and a huge part of everything that you've been going through. And I think you're an incredible human for dealing with it the way you've dealt with it. So,
nice.
Yeah.
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 I guess in February of this year, is this year? Dang. Yeah, this year. So the album was finished and the singles were coming out, and it was a month away from coming out, and the tour was 6 weeks away, and we played a show with Lane 8 in Montreal at Igloo Fest, and we came back very late on a Sunday. It's crazy torrential down, rainstorms, hurricane, just madness in Los Angeles. And I got home and my girlfriend was home and the power had gone out of my house, which was kind of normal. And then it went back.
This was like at midnight, right?
Yeah, 10 or 11 o'clock at night, and we cooked a late dinner and I went to sleep, and we were woken up at 3 a.m. by a very intense loud noise. I just remember her waking me up and being like, Ned, you gotta get out of bed. And this huge explosion happened, and like it sounded like a tree had fallen on the house, and she just like pushed me out of bed, and I was like still really dazed and out of it, and we just kind of like ran out into the hall, and all this mud was coming through this huge skylight that had crashed in. I mean, like feet, like the kitchen was like already in like 5 feet of mud, and it was coming out, and we like ran downstairs and put on like pants and like came back upstairs and got our phone, and like by the time we come up, the bedroom had all been smashed in, and there had been a giant mudslide that essentially destroyed my house while we were inside. We like Indiana Jones our way out of it. It was like the scene with the boulder. We were like slow-mo running away from the mud, and we went to her mom's house, and we haven't been able to go back since.
It's crazy.
So
essentially your house was a total loss.
Yes, our house was destroyed while we were inside. Yeah, and we should have been dead so many different ways. We were in the kitchen, an hour and a half before that had happened. And there was like giant 2x4s and huge steel rods that ran through the kitchen.
And you have this like massive skylight, which everything just came
the bedroom, we escaped within a couple minutes. It just like crashed in. So that happened a month before album came out. And so it was the February was a really intense time. We were preparing for this tour, and I was going through all this stuff. But I think when the album came out, there was so much positive. The Zoom listening party was like the best. It was a thing that we started for the first album because it was the pandemic, and it just became a tradition. And I think that was like so special. So like that was the most fun day, and the album coming out and just people's response to it, and then the live tour, which we'll talk about in a sec. But I think it was just like everything was like my life was a mess. I was like, I don't know where I'm gonna live. I don't know if insurance is gonna cover this, all this stuff. And like everything else was so good. Like this music was feeling so good, and the tour ended up being so amazing. Right. And so I just felt like I was like living a new life. And I remember we turned to each other after the first live show in Denver, and I was like, well, I guess we're in a band now. And I was like living in a new neighborhood, moved to Santa Monica, and like we were in a band, and I was like, new life, And obviously it's been difficult very, very difficult since then. But I think the first, and it was like you almost die. You have this like sense of like, oh my God, I'm still here. Like it's like you start over, and there's a real sense of a release in that.
I remember when you're like, you have to come see this, and I remember you taking me over. I was like, I can't even believe you survived this.
Yeah,
it's a miracle.
Yeah, I mean, Libeth my girlfriend definitely got me out of bed in a way that I don't know I would have, because I'm a deep sleeper.
Yeah,
and and I think the experience we've gone through is intense, and I think this album is very much wrapped into that thing. But I think the desert imagery is also about renewal, and there's a lot of death in the desert. There's not a lot of room for extra stuff. Right. And I feel like that's been like kind of the story of my year, of like just like burn down all the extra things, and like what you have left is like your life. So that's literally what's happened to my life, but it feels okay in a weird way. And I feel like this album is very special to me because of it. And I mean the lyrics, like some of the tracks just feel like they hit me differently now,
Right.
My time in the lyrics, it's like lamenting that you've wasted all of this time on this relationship. And it's like when you survive a near-death experience, the one thing that you realize is how precious time is. And so it's like, you're like, those lyrics start to hit differently. It's not just like, oh, I'm annoyed. It's like, no, you're like, I can't waste any more time. So, and I think we've had this conversation about like different things in our lives that have given us clarity, but that in the last few years, like we feel like we're much more focused on what we want, because we know we don't have that much
time.
Yeah. I think when we were younger in our careers, we were like, oh, we have so much time to like do this and do that, and one day we'll do that, and one day we'll do that. And now we're like, nope, if we're doing it, we're doing it now, like we want to play live, let's go. Like, let's do it. Yeah.
I think it's also changed your whole, like, I was telling you when we were in Miami this past weekend. Yeah. It's just like you're so much more vocal and clear about what you want now.
Which is weird. I always thought I was before, but I guess.
No, but now you're just like, I'm going to say what I want to say and actually really like go for it.
Well, it's like the thing is that I was talking to my mom about this yesterday. It's like we go through our life thinking that we are going to live to, 75, 85, if we're lucky, whatever, 90 plus is like a big achievement. And that there are some exceptions to that rule. There's horrible tragedies where people die young or whatever, but that for the most part, we're going to live this long life. And we kind of like base our life plans around that. And that's fine, because statistically it's probably true. But I actually think that it's a little bit dangerous, in that holding the idea that, when you experience something like that where you almost die, it makes it real that, hey, anything could happen at any time. And even though it's statistically very rare, it's still true. And so I think actually holding that idea in your head consciously, like in the front of your mind, just like remembering, hey, this, like I can go at any time, it's really helpful in the sense that it informs how you're going to live your life. Like if you think about it, if you're in a decision and you don't know what to do, and you have that thought in your mind, it usually clarifies pretty quickly what you're going to do. Or if you're in a fight with someone and you think about that, and you're much more likely to just be like, it's okay, like let's move on, or I can forgive this person, or I can say what I want to say to them, Yeah. And I think that it's actually really important. And I think in our career and our the stuff we've chosen to do, we've been like super intentional. And this album is very much, I think this series of albums is the story of us kind of like discovering who we are as artists.
Yeah.
And I think,
believe it.
yeah, that's clarified it. We had a long journey to get there.
Yep.
But it's sort of like,
But now that we're here, we're like, we gotta go.
The analogy that I always have is like this, like a baseball analogy, right? Which is that you start at home plate and you hit a home run and you run around the bases and you're back at home plate.
Right.
But like the person you are when you run around the bases because you hit a home run is totally different than the person you are when you started, even though you're physically in the same place.
Totally.
And I feel like that's kind of what this album is. Like we started our careers and we feel like we're actually in a similar place, but we've now like actualized more like who we are as artists.
Totally.
So yeah, it feels very meaningful to me, which is funny because I feel like the first album was very much our journey together, and I feel like the second and third albums we were on different things, but they're also connected.
The music was what kept it all together.
Totally. So. So can you talk about the live tour? Because I think that's also a big part of this album. We knew, right? We knew we were going to do a live tour when we were working on it.
I don't know if we knew as much as we kind of just like decided we're going to do it and we have to do it.
Yeah.
We've spoken about this live show for as long as I can remember. I mean, it's kind of like, I can't even believe it happened because it's been such a dream of ours for so long. So yeah, we embarked upon this live show completely blind, not knowing what it takes to do a live show, but we knew we had to make it come to life somehow. It's probably been the most fulfilling thing we've ever done in our entire careers too, which is the best part about it. And now I don't want to ever go back. I wish we had done this earlier.
Yeah.
I think it made us realize that like the possibilities are really endless.
Yeah.
And that you can like, keep recreating the show and make it bigger and make it different and bring in all these different elements. And then just being able to play our instruments, which we do in the studio all the time. And it's like
crazy.
What we've been doing since we've been like,
to be able to show people that we play, how we play together. I think that was like, it's so basic. I mean, the music industry is not complicated. And I think everyone's always looking for like this, I've been talking about this forever, but like everyone's always looking for these shortcuts, like these viral moments or this like, oh my God, this blew up out of nowhere. Or they're so clever. But like the meat and bones of the music business, like 95% of it is just go into a studio, make an album that feels very meaningful to you, to other people, go on the road, tour it, show people how you play that music, show people who you are, make some cool merch, like sell it, give people something to like bite into, and like, do it again and keep doing it and do it to the best of your ability and be as sincere as you can. It's not that sexy, but it's like not that complicated. It's hard work and you got to be really dedicated and focused, but like you don't need to crack the code. And like, yeah, there's one or two groups every year, artists every year who do something really crazy and everyone's like obsessed with them. But like most people who do really well just work at it, and they just do this really simple thing. I think we were amazed at how simple that was. And we were like, why did we not do this earlier? We were able to show who we were to people. And I think that was so meaningful to us.
For sure.
And we felt like, oh, wow, this is what we were,
I remember so many of our friends were just like, we didn't know you guys played like,
dude, you play the drums. Sam was drumming. Like, he was always like, yeah, I know how to play the drums. I've been playing drums forever. And I kind of didn't believe him because he never played the drums in the studio. And then when we were like practicing, I was like, you're going to play drums in the studio? He's like, yeah. And he starts like drumming. I was like, dude, it's fucking good. Like, I was like the stand-up, like, I don't know. I'm still always impressed because obviously I've seen you play guitar a million times and we've played together so much, but like, I didn't realize that you could drum like that. It's awesome. So that I think really added an amazing element to the show.
Thanks.
Yeah, and just being able to play those acoustic moments together, and
it's the best part.
Yeah. So
it's like I started looking at it as a concert rather than like
completely.
a DJ set.
So I'm very excited for this upcoming tour.
Me too.
Yeah. Okay, so do you want to talk about Circle in Time? Because I think...
Sure. I think we should talk about your obsession with vinyl.
We should. I am a vinyl...
And how...
Well, hang on. You make it sound like I'm like the only person. When I met you, you had the craziest record collection.
I know, but I feel like such a failure. Not a failure. I what's the word?
You just go through phases in your life.
I abandoned my vinyl craze.
This trilogy, Something Everything, vinyl was a big part. It was sort of like, oh my God, we're going to put this album out on vinyl. And that was like so fun for us. And the vinyl of each album has been important. And I think when we realized that this was a trilogy that we were going to release as a trilogy, our first thought was, let's make a box set. Because I was like, what would I want? You know, I'm a fan of this project. What do I want?
I think we thought about like the physical copy before we even thought about 100%. What we're going to do with it digitally.
It was always a physical copy. We didn't even know if it would come out digitally. And then we embarked on this crazy process with the label to make this thing. And it's been a huge labor of love and a massive amount of work. But it's been so cool. Can't wait for people to have it in their hands.
Sure.
We have stickers, slip mat. My friend is a monk, Zen Buddhist monk from Japan, did this beautiful calligraphy piece, which we hand stamped of the character for N, which is a song from Endless Dawn. So there's a lot of like cool personal things in there. Great photos. We wrote a lot of essays and.
You wrote a lot of essays.
Yeah, we wrote. Well, no, but like there were things that we've talked about, and I think it was sort of like we wanted to capture the story in a physical edition. Which is weird because people are always like, well, what's next? Like, what do you guys... And I'm like, well, I don't feel like this... Again, like, I don't feel like this necessarily ended anything specific, but I did feel like we needed a little bit of a gap, a little bit of a break. We didn't want to just go into doing another album.
Well, I think the lifestyle also changed how we probably approach doing the next album.
So we wanted to just sort of let that inform us. And then we had all of this music that we had been working on the whole time, either from Something Everything or Forever Now or Endless Dawn or in the in-between periods that somehow didn't make it onto an album that we always thought we'd release at some point, but we didn't know how because we loved it.
Right.
And that became, you know, like Memories and Lima and Hypercycle and
Forever Now.
Yeah, all these Looking For all these tracks that were just always they felt like they were part of these albums, but they somehow didn't fit. Not because they weren't good enough, but just because they just
didn't cohesively fit with the rest of the tracks around there.
And I think this was kind of this opportunity to sort of tell it was like the director's cut, you know?
Yeah. And it went from 6 additional ones to 8.
Yeah, 4 to 6 to 8. Yeah, it just kept growing.
Yeah.
And I mean, I think Memories too, like that was done right at the time when we were finishing Endless Dawn, and we knew we kind of weren't really going to be able to finish it in time for that album, but that it felt like
it was
a very special song.
Super special.
Yeah.
It's actually one of my favorite songs we've ever done.
Yeah.
And I think Kite String Tangle is incredible.
Yeah.
And I really felt like it was important to have a big, strong song that lyrically resonated with us on this trilogy. Yeah. So I'm really happy it made it on there.
And then the Richard song too, which I think Close Your Eyes, you know, and the Shalu one, which those lyrics, like Since the Mudslide for me have hit me like super hard.
Yeah.
Like No Way Back and having those people as part of this, I don't know, it just all feels very good.
Yeah.
So it's
I think it's incredible that you had like this vision for this box set.
Yes.
Like you really did.
But I think also, don't forget, you were very opinionated about these things. You always be like, I don't care, this is your project. And I'm like, no, it's not. Like, you're gonna like, and then I'm like, which one do you like, Ben? You're like, that one. And I'm like, okay. You have very, very specific and good aesthetic taste. And you always have. And I know that how much you love vinyl. Yeah. And so I'll be like, well, what do you think? And you're like, well, I would rather see this.
I think once you start it and we're going in this process, I'm like, okay, I need to get involved now.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, because I know you have, and also it's like important to have, you know, our project, I feel like is always the place where we meet.
Yes.
It's not like my idea or your idea. It's like what happens when we combine. I mean, even like we always talk about this, even when we're like doing directions somewhere, I'm like, which way should we go? And you're like, we think we can go this way. I'm like, maybe we go this way. And then we're sort of like, what if we do that, you know?
Yep.
Like I'm always curious about what your opinion is on something, because I know that it might make my choice better, you know, which is interesting. So yeah, I don't know. I feel like that process was cool. But I know you, because I know when you're excited about something, you'll be like, this is sick. And I was like, I need him to be like, this box set is sick.
And the box set is sick.
Yeah. So very cool. Shout out to Rachel and TNH team, Tabby and Pete, and Alex and Willis, who did an incredible amount of work on this project.
Yeah.
And to Rich for these beautiful designs, all this art to be able to capture our visions. So it's been very special. And I feel like it's allowing us the space to, you know, continue that story on.
Definitely.
So we have Dan again. Lane 8, thanks so much for being on our episode for a third time. It's very number 3. We're talking about Endless Dawn, and one of the things that we've been talking about is that we had a little bit of doubt of whether 3 albums in such a short period of time was gonna be like overkill. And I remember you were very gracious in reassuring us that it would not be. But I just wanted to know, like, just from your perspective, what you were thinking about in terms of that, you know, having a lot of output from us. And
yeah, it's kind of like a matter of perspective. I guess the like optimal way of doing things would be to space things out, especially because I think that Forever Now was still very much in people's minds, but also still like sort of doing its thing. The listeners that we've kind of developed and built up over the years were really connecting in a very real way with you guys. And I think you were seeing that not only on the recording side, but also at your live shows, that they were growing a lot. And that people were singing along to the music, and that it was, you know, people were finding a lot of meaning and emotional impact in their day-to-day lives with your music sort of at the centerpiece of that. And so I think when you have that, you're sort of like pouring gasoline on the fire of the excitement about your music. And even if it's not like 100% optimal for gaming the algorithm, sometimes you just have to do cool shit when you want to do cool shit. And I think this album is exactly that.
yeah,
Totally.
yeah. And on that note, like, there was a lot of different pieces that were moving around, and we had a lot of sort of difficulty being able to pick the singles because there was a lot of moving parts in that time with different artists and stuff like that. But that got us talking about just the process of picking singles. And it's so interesting because we've struggled with that. It's sort of fun. You have your own process. I just wanted to know, just in general, like, you know, people always ask us, how do you pick the singles? And we're like, well, you know, it's like there's no science to it, you know, but it is actually really interesting because, I mean, you've always said to us, well, what do you guys think?
Yeah, you're trying to predict the future almost, in a sense. And I think playing stuff out in your sets can help a lot with that. But then again, sometimes it can be quite deceiving because sometimes tracks, when you play them while they're still unreleased, they don't, like, the audience doesn't necessarily react to them like in a visible way. But that doesn't mean that they're not good. It just means that, well, it could mean a lot of different things. It could mean that they were just having a more emotional moment with it, and that can definitely be a thing. Or it could mean that, yeah, it didn't connect like at that moment that you played it in the set. Like maybe the actual arrangement of it in the flow of your set wasn't quite right. So that's definitely not like a perfect science. And I think I'm like, when I look back at some of the singles that I picked for my projects over the years, like it's not like I've always nailed it. Like and it also depends on your goals. Like, what is your goal with a single? Like, do you want to highlight singles because they're the tracks that you love the most? Like, I think that's probably the best reason to do it. Trying to predict like what's going to perform the best, or what's going to get radio play, or what's going to get playlisted, like, you may as well just like throw all the names of the songs in a hat and pick them out, because like you just don't know. Like, unless you have like a really big collaboration, which is not really your style, it's not really my style. Like, apart from that situation where singles kind of get picked for you because of forces outside of your control, essentially, um, I think just falling back on like, what do you feel the strongest connection to? Um, because ultimately, I think the listeners are sort of a reflection of your own taste and the decisions that you make when you're creating music, just for the simple fact that they like what you do, and you presumably like what you do as well.
Yeah, again, that was refreshing for us because we were coming from a world where it was like every single has to be a vocal track, every single has to, vocalist with the biggest profile, and it was like refreshing to be like, no, like
pick the 4 shortest songs in the album.
yeah, I
Those
picked
are the
yeah,
singles.
exactly. That track's too long; it can't be a single, and it's like,
Yeah, I remember you wrote back just saying like, go with what you feel should be the one. Like, just go with your gut. Don't think too much about it.
I think I also like having a mix, and I've always advised this for all of the albums that we've done in terms of picking singles. I like for people to pick a mix of instrumentals and vocals, not just 4 vocal tracks as singles. Like, okay, so like instrumentals generally, as a rule, don't perform as well as vocal tracks, but like, so what? That's not the only thing that matters. Like, there's so many different sides to this, and like people get so focused in on like optimizing performance and numbers and stream counts and radio play and all that stuff, and it's like, yeah, the end listener is just not a part of this conversation at all, which I think is a huge opportunity for people who are willing to think about the end listener. And yeah, I think sometimes you just need to be comfortable with sacrificing a little bit of commercial viability for having a spine.
totally, yeah.
I think what's really interesting too with what we've learned working with you is on every album you're always like, why don't you bring back the collaborators that you had in the previous albums? And I thought that was a really interesting perspective because I think for me and Ned, we've always been like, well, let's go find new vocalists or new writers. And you always encouraged us to go back and work with people we had worked with in the past. So I know that's a process that you also do with your own project.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely something that I took from artists that I like really like. The just having those longer term partnerships, and a bit of familiarity, I think is really nice. And it's also, I think it's practical too, because like starting over with someone from zero, it's a lot of work, and they don't, you just don't know each other yet. And someone that you've built a bit of a rapport with and a bit of a relationship with, I think at least it's easier a lot of times to get on the same page. So I think there's a lot of benefits that go with it. And I think having recurring characters in any story is nice. Like, that's just a normal part of storytelling. Like, also bringing new characters in too, that's also a part of storytelling. But like, to just be like one and done with everybody, that feels more transactional to me rather than like that you're building something together.
Totally. And it's also more meaningful personally because you get close to people when you make music with them
Totally.
in a weird way. And like you get like in one day, you can feel like you've known someone for a year. And if you do that a few times over a period of years, you get really close in this way to the people. And then it becomes meaningful when they're a part of your projects over years. And they've been, it's like you have this like really deep personal connection with them, which is also, you forget about it because you get so focused on, the outward facing version or aspect of your project. You sometimes forget about like, well, how does it feel? Like, are you having fun? Are you enjoying this? Is this like a meaningful experience in your life? Because if those things aren't there, then the music suffers and like the whole thing is like, well, why am I doing this? But when that feels like, oh wow, I had the best time making this album because I was with these people and I love them, like that's like ultimate, right? Ultimate.
Yeah, I'm sure you guys feel that like you probably feel closely about certain songs because of those working relationships, right? And the inverse is probably also true. Like, if the working relationship was not that great, like even if the song does well, like you kind of like, it's kind of hard,
Yeah, you have to get over it. You have to be like, okay,
Yeah.
it's like a fight. It's like weird. It's very intimate. I mean, making music is a very intimate process.
So intimate. Yeah. I think you like it's just like you said, like in a day in the studio, you feel like you've known someone for a lifetime.
Yeah. All right, cool. So last question. People have been, well, first of all, congratulations on your album. We haven't got a chance to say that. It's really cool. And we're so excited to be a part of it. I think Quiet Rush is a very special track. And people always asking, like, when are you guys going to make more music? So, also making music with you is super fun. So we're definitely looking forward to that. And I think, yeah, it feels like to us that like it's a very natural create.
I have not done like a huge number of like producer collaborations over the course of my career. I think, yeah, just for me, being a very like control freak, like wanting to be the pilot, it's been hard for me to like let my guard down and open up to different producers. Um, but I think because of the relationship that we've developed over the years, it just sort of broke down that barrier where I feel very comfortable, and like there's just that level of trust, I think, between us, and that's definitely essential for me to kind of let go and accept that not everything is going to be exactly how I would do it on my own, because you kind of need that in a collaboration, don't you?
Yep.
Totally. Yeah. And it was also like very organic. It wasn't like,
It wasn't like you want to collaborate.
yeah, it wasn't like, it was like after such a long time, you know, at first, like you giving feedback on the singles and then the EPs and then the albums and then remixing the tracks. It was like, it was really like very, very, very slow and organic process to a sort of.
Yeah, totally. And I can't imagine doing it any other way, honestly.
Totally. Well, but I think that's the thing is like, it was almost like that's the only thing left for us to do was to make a track together. But like, for some people it's not, like you said, it is very transactional. It's like, oh, this person's hot and this person's big, like if we do something together it'd be cool, you know. But like that was not at all a factor, and it was just like, let's let it organically develop. And all the collabs that we've done on the label, you know, with Jay and Wes and Shalou and all these people, those were very organic things that happened. It wasn't like, oh hey, we should do this because this would be, you know, huge or something. It was like, we're friends. And I think that plays a huge part in it for us, at least.
Yeah. And I think you can kind of feel that in the music too. Like at least I always feel like I can when it's genuine, like when there's an actual connection there, I feel like it comes through.
Definitely does.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much once again for taking the time to chat with us. Really appreciate it. And we'll see you soon.
Yeah, thank you guys and congratulations on the trilogy. It's really exciting, and yeah, it's just been an incredible run that we went on together. Not to say that it's over. I think like it feels like we're just getting started, but um it's nice to once in a while look back. I feel like I'm always very like, what's next? I'm always just like focused on what's next, but it's nice sometimes to just look back and kind of reflect on certain things. And like it leading up to these interviews, like I went back and listened to the old albums. I hadn't listened to Something Everything in a long time. Um, and it's just super cool. Like they're like little moments and stuff that you just forget about over time. So it's nice to look back.
Yeah,
Definitely.
totally.
Well, I think you've given us like a home and a platform to keep, you know, I think we're the best artists we've ever been working with you guys. So
Awesome. That's great to hear.
no reason to stop that. So
Yeah.
we're going.
Cool, guys.
All right, we'll see you soon.
All right. Have a good one, guys.
Thanks,
You
man.
too. So we are with Tishmal, who you probably caught at on our last episode about Forever Now. We are going to talk about Endless Dawn and our song Back Through You. Hi
Hey. Hey. Thanks for having me again.
again. Well, I'm going to keep this one open. Can you tell us more about Back Through You? What you were feeling, what we were talking about, the themes and all that.
Yeah. Wow. Well, I think we talked about on the last episode too. This one kind of took over the time in the studio. This was like the big one. And I remember everyone was really excited about it. It just took a little bit longer to bring about. Each song has its own way of coming to life. What I think is so fun about this one is it was originally Back to You, if you remember. But I think I either like said something so, like I like said it so soft, or something happened in the recording. And do you remember which one of you was like, hey, that sounds like Back Through You?
That was this guy.
Yeah.
There we go.
I also, yeah. Go
Well,
ahead.
because, and this is what I wanted to ask you about, it's because the conversation that we had when we were writing that song, which was a very deep conversation, about like intergenerational trauma, intergenerational like reincarnation. And I remember back through you, I remember once that came out, and I was like, that's cooler, and then you got like super emotional. And because then, yeah, you were like thinking about it, and then you were like, oh, and this is like, so I don't know if you want to talk about.
No, I'm an open book. I'm impressed that you remember so much. I think that's so special, and like it's coming back to me.
We spoke
Pun
about
intended.
we spoke about your grandmother, right?
Yeah, no, that's really, it's so funny. Again, how you can get so, like the tiniest word change can make such a big impact. And even in the moment, like you said, I felt emotional about it. Yeah, I was thinking a lot about my family at the time, even the beginning, like this song just goes there so quickly. I've since learned is a common experience where people have dreams of people that have passed on. And there's this sense of like nonverbal communication. And I've had a few dreams like that. And I think some dreams maybe are just dreams. I think some dreams have meaning. And I think that's up to the person who has the dream to decide what the dream means. Sometimes with a track, you'll have an idea that's pretty laid out. And I remember this one was a solid idea. Like the music was there, a lot of the hooks in the melody were there. And I'll go into the studio booth and I'll just sing kind of like nonsense syllables and just kind of let my voice follow and feel and move intuitively. And I just had this visual of this like giant spinning wheel, and it's like on fire almost. And this concept of coming back to someone. And I think while I was doing that, like that the words "back to you" came out as I was essentially ad-libbing over the top of the track. And yeah, it sparked this really deep conversation. So I'm mixed race, I'm Native, and I'm white. And in my Native culture and in many Native cultures, you try and make these decisions that are like 7 generations forward and 7 generations back. And yeah, it's just such a special thing to write about these decisions that we make in our lives. And at the time, yeah, I was thinking of myself as a child and my grandparents and their grandparents, and I wasn't really thinking about the forward part. But when the album came out, I had had a baby by then. So like between writing it and the release, I had gone from child to then mother, which is like, whoa, and not just mother, but like first time mother. So now when I hear the song, I'm thinking, wow, definitely the forward motion. And it's just really, really special that way. I feel like I've been talking for a minute, but anyway, that's kind of where we were. That's how it kind of started happening with that title, and it's just really special.
And also the lyric "burning a circle in time," which I remember we spent a lot of time about those words discussing that line, but that line ended up becoming the sort of catchphrase for the name of our trilogy, which is "Circle in Time." So,
oh my gosh.
Yeah. So that song, when we were talking about the trilogy, we were talking about what are we going to call it? And we were like, we should definitely try to find a lyric from one of the songs that's not a title. And when we were going through all the lyrics, that one felt like just very meaningful and cosmic, and that the albums had felt very like they were in the right place at the right time. And so that one, I don't know, that conversation felt like it was at the nucleus of a lot of the things that we were feeling when we were making these albums. So yeah, that's where it comes from.
Wow, I hadn't put that together, which is ironic because that was from a song that I had written on, but that's really, really special. I'm honored, honestly. That's really cool.
Yeah, that's how it goes.
Yeah.
Do you feel like, I mean, you could talk a little bit more about that, but do you feel like that you're a very different person now than when we wrote those songs?
Yeah, I mean, I think I feel lucky in that my core sense of self, I've had to really define like my inner core values. Like I've mentioned in the other episode, I think how when you leave a culture, when you leave a belief system that's so intense and so ingrained in your life, you have to very much like do just some deep reflecting on like what kind of person you want to be and what you want to do in the world. And I think having that core sense of self has helped me through a lot of changes, and definitely going from like this place in anytime I would hear a story, I would relate as a child, to then now being a mother and thinking of life in this new sense of self. It's changed a lot. I feel like a very different person, but at the same time, I'm grateful to know myself as an artist, because as I've learned who I am as an artist, it's like who I am as a person too, and that's remained there, which has really been grounding through all the change. And it makes me grateful for music. I think music can point to like, whether or not you're the writer or you're the listener or the DJ or the producer or whoever, like music can point to like where your heart is on a way that like nothing else can. Like art is so cool that way. So it's kind of crazy. I feel like sometimes, and maybe you guys have had this experience where you'll have a song and it means one thing when you write it, and then time goes on and it's almost like it was like telling the future. Because there were times in my postpartum, it's just such an intense change, and your body's going through the grieving process of your old life and the new life that you're given, this new little human you're caring for. And it can be really intense for a lot of women, this postpartum experience. And to just like, even on a micro level, like I would spiral, I would get like, have these moments where I didn't feel like myself anymore. And it was so scary, but like, I could just look at my son and just be like, oh, here I am. Like, I'm coming back through you. And I'll even say things to him and I'm like, oh, I sound like my grandma. This is crazy. And my old self, I think, would have been like, ugh, I don't want to sound like my mom or my grandma. But now I'm like, oh, I love that I sound like them. I love this. This is how they move through me. And anyway, that concept could like spiral off a million different directions. And I wrote about that in the poem for the art book that you made, which I love, by the way. It's so good. Oh my gosh, there's so much good art in there. But like, there's just so many ways we can come back to each other. And it doesn't always have to be like a mother-child generational thing. It can even be the way we support each other in our communities. The way a simple hi to someone can just bring you back to the present moment. I think it's powerful.
Agreed.
Perfectly said, yeah. So, okay, well, thank you so much.
Thanks.
We
Thanks
love
for having
you.
me.
We love you, and we're so excited to work on more music with you.
Oh, the feeling's
And
so mutual.
yeah.
You guys are the best.
Thanks.
So we'll see you soon. And yeah, thanks for being on.
Okay, thanks. We'll see ya.
All right, we're here with Mckay Stevens again, our friend and great songwriter, to talk about Endless Dawn. And I think it's interesting because this, you know, you were involved in the first album without realizing it because it was from an old session we had done. And the second one, you brought in Tishmal. And then the third album, you were really involved in it because there was 3 songs that you were involved with: Back Through You with Tishmal, My Time with Shalu, and Out of the Silence with Tasha. Right. But what do you remember about the making of this album? Because you were just so involved in it.
Yeah. So album 3 of the trilogy coming back. Super excited. I think that like when we did the Back Through You with Tishmal, I just love that song. Like that was definitely one where we did spend more time. We kind of geeked out on getting deeper and deeper and like connecting everything poetically to like the concept and the theme. And like, I don't know, I think there's just so many layers to it, and how rich her voice and even some of the melodic choices and the sound design is just so cool. Like I love stuff like that. Like I don't think anybody knows the truth of existence, but it's fun to think about and be like, what if there are like multiple lives? What if there is like an eternal spiral through and we keep coming back and connecting, kind of like a cloud atlas type of a thing that like maybe you're a soul I've met in many lives and we come to alchemize art to uplift the souls and change hearts, or, you know, whatever it might be. But I think that this song I love listening to it, so much because it brings me back that feeling of when we were writing it and how magical and deep that people can take it. Even when I was coming on the Zoom today and it was like Burning a Circle podcast or something, I was like, oh yeah, Burning a Circle in Time. Like that line alone, I love the inner rhymes on the burning a circle in time. And then just thinking it, because how I remember like when I was starting to get really into like spiritualism or trying to understand any form of what all the theologies have been and understanding the wisdom and stuff, like sometimes picture says 1,000 words. And there was this picture that this guy who was kind of pretty prophetic in his own right had painted. He was a good friend of mine. And it was like this galaxy, but then as you'd go further and further in it, then it was a bunch of galaxies, and it just like it blew my mind on how the infinite could become semi-tangible in this galactic form. And that song gives me that feeling where I feel like I'm timeless. I could like go into the best meditation sound bath, close my eyes, and my soul could just go somewhere outside of time to maybe the true golden nature of what we are at our core when you strip away our egos and our births and our mortal forms on this world. It feels kind of like that to me. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, that's like the highest form of art if you can get there, right? Like
totally.
So
I definitely think so.
Yeah. You want to talk about Shalou?
Yeah. And then the third one was My Time with Shalou, which was really interesting because we got in with Shalou. It was probably the last track we made on this album. We got in with Shalou because we wanted to do another record because working with Joe is just awesome.
Yeah.
I'm sure now you guys, I feel like you guys are now friends and working on that.
Yeah, we introduced you. Yeah, I love that.
So I remember going to that session with Shalou and he put down this incredible vocal melody, and we just kind of sat there and we're like, oh, we can't really. It didn't the lyrics didn't come like quick to us or naturally, and so we're like, hey, well, we know somebody that can probably help us with this.
Yeah.
So let's call the song doctor.
Yeah. Anyways, and Joe, we asked Joe if he was okay with it. He was like, yeah, sure, bring him in.
I don't think Joe had ever worked with another writer per se in that effect. And I think we're just like, well, Mckay is somebody we really trust and love working with. And so are you. And I think this would be a great, opportunity for us to all get together in the room and see what we can come out with it. And we did. And it was amazing. It came out beautiful. And it's one of our favorite songs for sure. And I think we couldn't have done it without you. So
yeah.
Thank you guys for inviting me in on that. I remember when you guys sent me, you're like, hey, we got this thing and this vocal melody with Shalou, like, would you be down? I'm like, yeah, anything you guys want to do, I'm down to do anything. And I remember back in like the Hype Machine blog era, like hearing some of Shalou's tracks, I remember his ethereal vocal and like really emotional chill house kind of stuff, that I was like, oh, this is awesome, man. Came over, the song felt so special and so amazing. And it's funny because you guys introduced me to Joe that day. And like anybody that doesn't know Joe, he's like,
best.
So yeah, he's like a teddy bear. He's such a tender, loving, kind, amazing human, and just so like talented, with everything. And it's crazy because like, you hear his voice on records, but that was the first day I was in the room, and then you guys are like vocal producing him, and I'm just listening to it like he's just singing that, and it sounds that pure, like his voice is pure, and he's a pure soul. And we after we finished that session, I remember Joe and I were walking out. We said goodbye to you guys. We're walking out to our cars. We'd parked next to Jordan, and then Joe in his like tender, cute, little shy kind of way was like, "Hey man, like." I really liked working with you. Would you like want to help me with some other songs on my album? And I was like, dude, I would love to. This is amazing. So yeah, like thank you guys. Cause then I went on and Joe and I now have a couple songs out on his new EP together that
amazing
he wrote, and it all came from you guys just saying, let's call the song doctor.
No, but like in the same way that you introduce us people like Tishmal, like, it's like, the people that that you're like, these people are gold, like you need to hang, like we're happy when people we love. We were talking about earlier with Nathan Nicholson and Richard Walters, like because of working on the album they met, and then now they're friends, and it's like we love to be able to like grow the chain of good talented people and just like keep it going, you know, because it's like that, you know, something good is going to come out of it always, you know, and I think that's amazing.
Something I always want the world to know is how generous and giving you guys are too. That like, I never, in working with you, I had zero expectations. I thought you're just great people. We made great art. You never like had a manager or a lawyer come in and be like, hey, we're taking all this. And you're, you know, it was like from the jump, you just came like, oh, hey man, you want to split everything equally? And I was like, thank you. Like, that's, wow. You don't have to do that. You know, you guys could take the lion's share of everything. You are the artist. You are doing the bulk of the work with the production and all of that. That to share with people like me, to share with really beginning first-time artists like Tasha, you know what I mean? Like, so many things that you do are just so much bigger and so important than I think you even know, because you've never been a songwriter or a smaller artist like I have on the number one DJ's record, or you know what I mean? Like,
well, actually, we
have,
and we've been given very little on it, and so we
yeah, I guess, yeah, you have, and you know.
It's an interesting point because I think in dance music, electronic music, the vocalists and the songwriters are not given enough credit, not given enough shine, you know. And like the truth is that a lot of DJs go out and make good money on the road because of the songs that people have helped them make and or made for them in a lot of cases, like you were saying. And so people need to be treated right. And we've had people who did treat us right, and it's helped us financially enormously. And we have people who didn't, and that sort of sucks because we're like, wow, we did a lot of work on that, and it has a bajillion whatever, and we made no money on it, you know, like. Yeah. But like, so it's like, and also it's like for us, it's like you want to win, you want all your friends to win too. It's like, why? That's not fun. It's not fun for you. For it's like if the track blows up, you know, if the track doesn't blow up, then it's like who cares? But if the track blows up, then it's like great, everybody made money on it. That's awesome. Like you want that to be the case. So it's like, I don't know.
Yeah, but the vocals are just as important as the music.
Totally.
If not more important than that.
Exactly.
So it's like...
And for us, like, you know, it's funny because I've seen in the last few years a few interviews with Nile Rodgers, who's like one of my heroes, and also Jimmy Jam and Terry Lewis, who I think are like two of the best producers. You know, Nile Rodgers did all of the Diana Ross, David Bowie, Chic, disco, like Duran Duran, you know, Get Lucky with Daft Punk, just like one of the most prolific songwriters and producers ever. And he had a partner, you know, Bernard Edwards, who was the bass player, and they did everything together for a long time. And it was like 50-50 no matter what, no matter who made what. It was always 50-50. Even if one of them did nothing and the other one did everything, it was still 50-50. And Jimmy Jam and Terry Lewis, who did all of the Janet Jackson albums, who are just incredible, they said their deal is the same thing. And I was like, that's so funny because that's me and Osama's deal is like everything is 50-50 no matter what. Like if I was sick and he did the whole thing, it's 50-50. If he was sick and I did the whole thing, it was 50-50. So it's like that way we're not thinking about what did I do on the record.
Yep.
And it's just like best idea wins. We're just going to support each other. And sometimes all it takes is the other person being like, that's dope. It just needs a little of this and then it's done, you know? But then that's it. It's like, otherwise, if you're thinking, oh, I need to earn my percentage of this, then you're going to go and put stuff in there that doesn't need to be in there. And it's going to make it a worse thing. So it's like, I think bands that are successful, you know, are successful because they have a split that makes sense for everybody. And usually it's pretty even. And I think that's kind of the only way. Otherwise, you're just going to get people want to know why bands break up. And I think 90% of the time, it's because the split wasn't even. And then it just creates a lot of problems, you know?
Whether the song makes any money or not, the important thing for me, and I think for everyone else that I also try and pass on with anyone I work on, is just like the dignity and the taking out of the egos and the putting the value of equal value on, you know, it's almost like taking a monarchy into a democracy where it's like, hey, we're taking the power structure, we're trying to flatten it out and make it democratic in this process to make a better, more free world. And I think in art, man, I just know so many songwriters that are so talented, but they They hate themselves. They have no self-worth because the world keeps telling them and keeps treating them like they're not worth anything.
Yeah.
And so what you start to learn, we see the world as that mirror, and you guys have been so good in helping me be like, oh man, like you're worth something. You have value, like all of that. That like, it doesn't even matter if that value comes with money. It's a value that is psychological and should be inherent with all human beings. But unfortunately, in a capitalistic system, we deal with a lot of people that are holding millions and billions in tech companies, and then the people on the bottom making the intellectual property of a song are paid fractions of a penny. And then you start to think about yourself, oh, I'm not worth much, and the art that I make isn't worth much. Yeah. But I think that's why, going back, I know there's a long tangent, but to the community that I think you guys build with the collaborators on records and how you treat people and how you do everything is so important, because, it's creating great art, and it's also upholding the forgotten songwriters that have, in some cases, lost value in their lives.
Yeah, and it's true. You need someone to sort of being reaffirmed. That's also why we've kind of like tightened our circle to just keep it around people who believe in this project, because not everyone's going to be into it, and that's cool. But like, we don't like, we kind of have a thing now. It's like, we don't chase, if someone says no. Sometimes there's a like, you got to make sure you hear the no properly, because somebody says no and they're like, I never said that, like, you got to make sure that like
that A&R didn't get it to the right person.
Like, it wasn't really a no, but like when you hear no, it's like, cool. We don't chase anybody. We want people who want to be part of our thing. We'll always ask, and if it's a no, it's cool. Maybe it'll be a yes later. I mean, there's people we worked with on this album who said no to us 10 years ago, and then they came back. So it's pretty cool. Yeah.
It's cool too, because you guys, you come from like the abundance mindset of not, people coming from a desperate or desperation mindset are trying to take any opportunity and, really fight for 5 no's or whatever. But to know, like, we know who we are, we know what we love, we know what we don't, we're going to trust our taste and our gut. Everything will align. What we need will come to us. Yeah. What we don't can go by the wayside,
Thank you,
sure.
man.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Really means a lot.
Yeah. It's such a pleasure to work with you and to talk to you and stuff. So thank you so much for your involvement with these albums, and also just talking to us today and sharing, giving the world a little bit of an insight into your mind, and how you just, I'm always like, you're like Willy Wonka, like the chocolate factory. You just like spill out all these great nuggets and ideas and things that we can just like, always, it's like you're just like freely sharing all these thoughts and feelings you have about the world, which is just awesome, and turns into songs, turns into art, just turns into an idea that you might find helpful, So we appreciate you more than you could ever imagine. Yeah. So
same with you guys.
All right. Well, we'll talk to you soon. We'll get in the studio again soon, and enjoy your time in the studio today.
All right. Later.
That's okay.
Cool. So now we're going to chat with Nathan Nicholson again, who was on our first episode, about our song Under the Surface and his involvement with Endless Dawn. What's up, Nathan?
What's up, guys?
Good to have you back. You were saying about Under the Surface, you were saying it was originally called Starry, right?
Well, yeah, I was just looking at the lyrics, and it's Starry with 3 R's, I see. Is that correct?
Yeah, because I think Osama titled it Starry.
That would be me.
Yeah. And it was a totally different instrumental, right?
Completely.
I always had the feeling that track reminded me, it felt the most indie, like close to what you do with Boxer Rebellion.
Yeah.
And it felt like a band. It felt like we got the most band side of you on that. And I remember being very excited by that. Because it sounded like Boxer Rebellion. It sounded like The National a little bit. It sounded like it had this just indie feeling. And we were like, this vocal's so good. We have to totally redo the instrumental and make it like fit.
Yeah, that came really naturally.
Yeah.
think as soon as we took your vocal off Starry and put it on alone and started messing around with chords and stuff, it was like instantaneous.
Oh, so you already had another instrumental and you just kind of like.
No, we took your vocals and just put different.
Oh, and you
chords on
built it back up.
Yeah, but like it was like in a day because we were so inspired by that vocal that it was so quick to kind of just put it together. Yeah.
And while the other thing that was interesting is that we had a lot of moving parts when we were working on Forever Now and Endless Dawn. It was originally supposed to be on Forever Now, and then it ended up being moved to Endless Dawn. And then we had a lot of moving parts with the singles, and it ended up being the first single. So it also kind of ended up being, to me, one of the main tracks of Endless Dawn in terms of when you think about the album.
For sure.
It's sort of like a real staple of the album. Like,
I was heartbroken it wasn't on Forever Now.
yeah. And I think also lyrically, well, I'm sort of curious, like, when, that record lyrically for me is very vulnerable. I mean, you're always very vulnerable. All your lyrics are really vulnerable and beautiful, but like that one.
I'm a sensitive guy, man.
You're such a sensitive guy, man. I love it. Like, we're all sensitive people, right? Like, but like those lyrics, man, they like
incredible.
Yeah, to be able to say, I know I'm not perfect, but somehow like you still believe, like that's a very, I don't know.
Every time we play that song, I just want to scream those words out. It's like it's like something that's like it's not natural to really say it and like project it that way. And I think that's the beauty of this is that you can and you do and you feel it.
And also, like, is it hard for you to be that vulnerable?
No, I don't think so. I've always been kind of hard on my sleeve, able to talk about stuff.
Yeah, it's amazing. It's so refreshing. And
were you writing it about anyone specific?
I guess if anything, it would be about me. And I mean, yeah, because I have the lyric. The only constant in life is that I need her. That bit, that would definitely pertain to, I'm in a good relationship and everything's cool, and for so many years, especially being a musician, I relied heavily on my wife, and she was has been my biggest support. So yeah, I mean, I would imagine that if I'm going back to myself writing those lyrics, I would say, yeah, that would be it.
Yeah.
Well, thanks for sharing that.
Yeah. heavy. Yeah.
But it's also interesting that, for something that's so personal and vulnerable to you, that you had like 6 different drafts of it, like it's interesting that you're very flexible of like, oh, I could change it. I remember you sending us things and being like, either this or this, and they would be like both good, and we'd be like, yeah, okay, we like this one more. But it was sort of like,
I kind of I think when I'm co-writing something with the band, it's slightly different. When I write a lyric, the guys don't tend to. They let me kind of do my thing, and they trust me to do my thing. I think with co-writing, especially when it's like very much a song that you need to be happy with, because it's your album at the end of the day. So and we all have to be happy, of course, but I think I'm just quite open about because I want everyone to be happy about it. Because it's like, as you say, a song like when you're playing it live, you want to really feel something. And if you're like, I don't really like what he's saying there, but it sounds cool, then it's not going to feel the same when you're playing it live.
Yeah,
that's right.
I would love to see it live. I mean,
well, hopefully you get to perform it live.
Yeah, perform it live. Yeah, no, we're gonna make it happen
for sure.
100%.
It's like literally. People love that song.
Yeah.
Like it's one of the favorites for sure.
A friend of mine just wrote the other day, like, that he was going through a really difficult breakup and a hard time, and he was like, been listening to your music and it's really helping, and I was like, oh, that's great. And I just said, out of curiosity, what what are you listening to? And he's like, right now, Under the Surface is really holding me down. And I was like, oh yeah, like
Oh, that's great. I mean, not great that he's not going through a good time, but great that it's helping. We'll send him my best.
I will. Cool. All right. Well, thanks so much for talking to us. We appreciate it. And let's work on some new music.
Yes.
Yeah. Let's do it.
And a live show for sure.
And we'll find a way to get you in there.
Thanks, guys.
Cool. Thanks so much.
Thank you. All right. So we're down to the last question. The same question.
Desert Island.
Which record is it going to be? This time you're really on a desert island, though.
Okay. So I'm going to answer first.
Yes, you are.
Wait, I actually have to think about this. I need like 5 seconds to think about it. I hadn't thought about it. I think I'm going to go with Under the Surface. That record feels very personal. And it's not about it being the best record. Actually, there's a lot of records that I probably listen to more, but that one is the one. If I had one to choose, I think I would go with that one.
Do I get to take the same song with me to my island?
You taking the same one?
I'm taking the
Look
same
at
one.
that. We picked the same. This never happens.
Ever.
Like, we're so opposite in our taste. It's so funny, but like, that's so funny. I thought you were going to say a different one, but I'm not going to say which one I thought you were.
Which one do you think I was going to say?
I'm not going to say. I'm not going to say. I thought you were going to say All I Know.
That's another one too.
Yeah.
But today I'm feeling under the surface.
This is the problem. It's like asking to pick between your... Did I tell you the story of Charlie, my niece? Charlie was, and my nephew Jake, who's 2 years older than her, they're 4 and 6. We were hanging out July 4th weekend with my parents, and they were like, we asked them if they were going to get in trouble, who they would prefer to be yelled at by, or like who they would prefer to get in trouble with. And Jake was like, Daddy, he wanted his dad he thought his dad was softer. And we asked Charlie, and she goes, I'm not answering that question. And we were like, why not? And she was like, nope. Like, she knew better than to like choose between them. And that's kind of how I feel. I'm like, oh, I don't want to choose between these tracks, because they're like all our babies.
For sure.
So, yeah.
I think that's the beauty of music, right?
Yeah. All right. Well, I don't have any more to say, do you?
I don't.
Okay. So thank you so much to Dan and Mckay and Tishmal and Nathan for being on this episode. Thank you guys so much. Thank you all for watching all these episodes, and who knows, maybe we'll do this again on albums 4, 5, and 6. We'll see. But yeah,
I would just like to add that this whole series began because we all thought Ned should start his own podcast.
No, it was started because Tabby and Pete. This is because of Tabby and Pete. This is because Tabby and Pete, we were in New York and we had a whole day we were talking about it, and they were like, you should have your own podcast. And I was like, to talk about what? And they were like, I don't know, like whatever, music and stuff. And so then Tabby came up with this concept of, why don't you guys do at least a 3-episode podcast, talk about the albums, and thought it was a great idea. And
but every time we have conversations with Tabby and Pete, we're always like, that would be great for Ned's podcast.
Yeah, so maybe I'll start a podcast. And he was telling me this at lunch today. He was like, so maybe you should start the podcast. And I was like, and do what? Like, but I
just think it's like naturally such a good fit for you, and you're such a great talker and eloquent speaker.
But I don't have anything to say if we're not talking about ours.
You have so much to say about everything in life, bro.
I don't know. Okay. Well, if you think I should have my own podcast, then comment below. No, I'm just kidding.
There you go. Comment below.
Maybe
if
we'll do it.
If you enjoyed this podcast,
we need to write 3 more albums, and then I'll consider it. So anyway, thank you for tuning in, and yeah, we'll see you on the road soon.